Hey everybody, it's Simone Morris. Can you believe the podcast is 1 year old this month? I cannot even believe that it's a year old. There are so many lessons that I've learned from stepping out on faith by launching this podcast. The podcast came to being because I decided that I wanted to continue the learning from the Power of Owning Your Career book. In that book, I interviewed 14 different diverse leaders. And I have to tell you that my favorite part of that process was the actual interviews. I honestly felt poured into from a learning standpoint. And I felt like it wasn't the end after those interviews. I felt like I wanted to continue interviewing leaders. And that's what I've done. And I'm just in awe that it is a year later since rolling that out last December. And there are many things to come in the podcast, but I just want to take a moment out because December is my celebratory month. It's my birthday month, and I just feel in a celebratory mood where I want to stop and say thank you to all the guests that have been on the podcast. You have been amazing. I've had some episode where I'm just jaw drop, just in awe of the experiences that the people that have been on the podcast have had. And I'm so grateful for them saying yes to me to share their story and to be authentic in sharing how they moved into the driver's seat and what advice they had for our listeners on how they too can be in the driver's seat. So a big thank you to all the guests of season 1, season 2, and seasons to come. I'm grateful and thank you. I enjoy every single interview. It is a pleasure to just hear validation of some of the things that I believe, or similarities. I'll say, instead of validation, I'll say similarities in what I believe as well is required to own your career. The other thing I want to say is thank you to all the loyal listeners. I am excited because we are in 26 countries at this time, and it is just growing the amount of international presence we have for the podcast. I just got done doing an interview with someone in Austria who found the podcast, listened to the podcast, enjoyed it, and felt like they wanted to share their story on the podcast. And so many of those things are happening, or I'm receiving emails of people interested in being on the podcast to share their story. Know that I am going to be here continuing to share stories that enlighten, inspire, motivate you to be in the driver's seat and to take ownership of your career. My one big ask of you as we wrap up the first year is to help me grow this podcast into a bigger movement. And what that really means is I need your help to, one, share the podcast with all your friends. Share the podcast with them, get them to listen to the podcast. And number two, I need you to do some reviews for the podcast. There is Apple or wherever you listen to it, go ahead and do a review. Hopefully, if it's a 5-star review for the podcast, it's just important for us to get visibility and to continue to grow as a podcast. I expect so many exciting things to happen in 2020, and I am thrilled for you to take this journey with me, to continue this journey of greatness, because we all deserve to own our careers and we deserve to be happy in our careers. This is Simone Morris wishing you a happy holiday season. The podcast will be back next week, but I did want to stop and say thank you. Thank you for being a guest and a loyal listener, and whoever else is out there listening, you are appreciated. Thank you so much for being a part of the Power of Owning Your Career journey. Take care.